So we have a relationship with the animals. We have the process of making this art, and now it's made. We know that a lot of the caves were not inhabited for a long time. That people didn't necessarily live underneath the shadows of these sculptures and paintings, but that the caves would be returned to for, say, over 1,000 years in the case of Neo, other places longer. What Dario, I know you speak about the signs and the symbols. So once these images are created, what meaning did they have to the people that they would go back to them or want to keep seeing them? As a nomadic people, why would they have these places that they tied them back to? Is that right?
Sign, symbol, myth. We have a deep conventions che l'art Paleolithic, the Paleolithic art, is a phenomenon very complex, and our parameters, our scientific approach is very, very little and very difficult to arrive to the prehistoric man. In my opinion, prehistoric man is disappeared forever. And our tentative to remake the real life of prehistoric man, it is impossible. We have, in my opinion, the necessity to proceed in the study, in the research, but we have, I think, the diaphragms from us and Paleolithic man or prehistoric man is closed forever.
Yes, please. Yes,
I can spend the last few words. I want to say that I, as a cultural anthropologist, have been very much interested and excited by this congress. For I see that Paleolithic art and Paleolithic peoples as a whole still are a continuous challenge for our knowledge of what man is. So we see that at the very beginning of the history of the long journey of modern man, we find people that were already complex, that made complex societies, that had complex constructions. We can try to interpret them with some kind of parameters. For example, knowing from an anthropological point of view, the knowledge about modern hunter-gatherers can aid us to reconstruct cosmologies and ontologies that are very different from what we have in our modern society, but can perhaps be a useful tool to interpret the facts of prehistory. But still these facts transmit us that modern man at the beginnings of his history was just already of a great complexity. It was able to create a complex view of the world that still continue to admire us and to stimulate us to find a new perspective to comprehend them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us and talk. I think, do we have time for questions?
We have just a couple of minutes for
one question that I'd really like to ask. I have good voice. So. One question I would very much like to ask of this illustrious panel. Throughout this week, I've heard the term symbolic all the time. You know, they find a little incision somewhere that is tens of thousands of years old, and immediately they say that's symbolic of modern behavior, that's modernity, and nobody says what it is symbolic of. And how would you, so why are you using symbolic all the time? And do you have a response to this question of mine?
It's a good question. Who's going to make the challenge?
I think that one thing is if you look at some painting or engraving, it might seem like it's just an animal or a weapon. But no, you can't hear it? It might seem like it's just an animal or a weapon, but there may be other layers of meaning. It might be symbolic of something else, a belief, a spiritual being. So we can't just like look at, for example...
Sorry, the interpreter cannot hear.
I'm getting nothing in my headset. Hang on. Okay, I'm getting it over here.
It's okay now.
So anyway, it might be more than just what's apparent. It might be deeper layers of meaning.
Nobody's saying what.
Well, in my talk, I gave the example that those weapons in the Lascaux cave and other caves might not just be weapons, they might be the weapons that the gods are throwing from the sky during a thunderstorm.
You can't prove that scientifically.
I can't prove it, but it's a theoretical framework.
I understood when I came here that the conference was about non-iconic art, or that was one of the major themes. Is that correct? And that is difficult to interpret symbolically. I think if you have a picture, a representation of some animal or a spear or a handprint, you can say that that is symbolic. Right? I come from the field of music myself, and music is very often not symbolic, yet it's an art. Dance also can represent an animal, but it does not have to be representational. And so similarly, I think it would be worth examining whether the very earliest non-iconic marks, at least, were not symbols of anything, but had something to do with an impetus to, as I said earlier, transform reality or make ordinary reality more than ordinary. So I think that it would be a useful discussion at some point, maybe this conference is too late, about not just assuming, having it be an ideology that everything is symbol, have a symbol fixation, but you don't even have to use the word. It's almost as if something is not a symbol, then we're not going to discuss it, because it's not art. That seems to be how it's used. And so why don't we not make that assumption, but we study things not as symbols, but just as illustrations of this human impetus or need to make their ordinary environment, or their ordinary bodies, or their ordinary movements more than ordinary. I think that's a great human feat.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think our roundtable was very, very interesting and useful.